where we left off, after the Tower of Babel, um, flood happened. The people tried to build another ziggurat, tried to commune with the gods and the demons. And God, they tried to build a city away from nature, build themselves up to be gods themselves, and God confused their language so that they spread across the land. And we're shifting to chapter 12, which is a big shift in the way that the story is told. We're getting more into a storytelling type of narrative of individuals. So the shift is going to be more into a smaller segment of window. This is going to cover starting with Abraham, and eventually we'll get to Joseph. A lot of cool, fun stories here, and this is the first big shift between chapters 1 through 11, and then chapter 12 to the end.
I do want to go over this real quick. So Genesis 1 through 11, primeval history,
Primeval.
universal stories, creation, floods, Tower of Babel, mythic tone, symbolic, multiple sources. So this is JPE, all present. That's J as in Yahwist, Elohist, and Priestley. So all of those influences are present from 1 to 11. And Genesis 1 was written way later than Genesis 2, for example, way later. And then from Genesis 12 and onward is the patriarchal narratives, which is what you just said, begins with God's call to Abram, and then focus shifts from humanity to one family slash nation, Israel, more historical tone, real geography, tribal dynamics. So
Right.
different period, different shift. And this is where I think oftentimes I say that we go from collection of mythologies from that area, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Assyria, all of that, Armenian highlands. So all these Greece, all these shared myths. It's like a collection to start the beginning. What is it called? The origin story, and then now it just shifts through
The
the
Genesis.
yes, the origin story, and then it shifts to now being a lot more focused on one, just the history through a particular lens. All right, so let's just, I guess, read chapter 12.
Yes, 12. The call of Abram. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go out from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Lot was mentioned in the genealogy in the chapter before here. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they
Acquired.
set out to go,
Sorry.
which includes servants and slaves. And
Yep.
it's actually implying a very large amount of people, a full caravan of people, not just like a small household,
Yep.
but a lot of people. So he took everything that they had, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. We know what that is. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. This is a very important oak, and we'll find out later. In fact, I might even say that this might be the silent oak.
Interesting.
And we'll see why in the coming chapters. Very interesting. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him, right? Altar to the God that had appeared to him, the one that's talking to him. From there, he moved to the hill country on the east side of Bethel, which means house of the Lord, house of God, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord, Yahweh. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. Do we want to stop there or continue?
Sure. Yes. So this is an interesting one because actually just maybe a couple of weeks ago there was a whole controversial thing happening in the culture around this quote right here. Did you capture it at all? Do you know what I'm talking about? Tucker Carlson and Ted
Hmm.
Cruz. Okay.
Right.
So worth mentioning since it's right here actually, even though the ship has sailed. Everybody's forgotten probably, but Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz had a sit down, and Ted Cruz at some point literally said, "I'm I'm pro-Israel because God said God said I will bless those who bless Israel, and whoever curses Israel, I will curse them." And it was a huge deal, but of course, as we can see, there's no such language here at all. Not to mention, Abram isn't even Abraham yet, and he's saying how he's going to make him a father of many, many nations, not just one. Not to mention that it's Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. Jacob represents Israel, so that's like so many lineages before you get to creation of Israel. So that was and I was only seeing very few people just coming in and saying, "Yo, there's no such thing in the Bible. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, I mean, it's Jacob. It's Jacob, Abram's son, who's renamed Israel. And in that particular interview, yeah, Cruz said that God commands in the Bible for people to support Israel, and those who don't are going to be cursed. And Tucker Carlson uh, asked him, "Well, where in the Bible is that?" And Cruz didn't know, so Tucker said it's in Genesis, which he's referencing right here about bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. There's another verse in, I believe it's Numbers, that's more specific to Israel, but it's specific to Jacob, right? And those are the only two parts of the Bible that could have any similarity to what Cruz is believing. And Cruz comes from a dispensationalist uh, background, and that interpretation is hammered hard in that background. The idea that not only is it like those who bless the Jews will be blessed and those who curse the Jews will be cursed, that it's throughout all of generation, and it applies to a modern state created 1948 that named itself Israel. That is the same thing. And
Yeah,
most Christians don't interpret it that way. That's just a dispensationalist interpretation. Everything outside of dispensationalism does not see it that way at all. And that includes a
yeah.
lot of Protestants who are covenant theology Protestants. They don't interpret it that way either.
So, so a lot of the Scofield Bible was hammered in the American culture hardcore, and the majority of the world obviously rejected it for obvious reasons. But America just the Protestant evangelical sides, just really Baptists really took it in. So obviously not every individual within those groups, but predominantly just was really taken in here, and in that it really the footnotes end up just turning the entire book about Israel, and like the rapture is not a thing in
Right.
Christianity, but over there it just becomes this big thing. And so there's they really it's like through the footnotes they rewrote the Bible like entirely what it means.
It was a novel interpretation right through the footnotes. It started with, I think, the Darby in the late 1800s, and it coalesced into the Scofield Reference Bible, which was dispersed throughout America quite heavily through, I think, Oxford Press,
Yep.
and had a lot of influence in Southern Baptists, the Southern Baptist Convention, and
Protestants
eventually
and
evangelicals. And,
evangelicals.
and yeah, it's a very unique theology to American evangelicalism and Baptist churches. Every other Christian outside of dispensationalists look at that and say, what are you saying, man? This has nothing to do with some modern country that decided to call itself Israel. Right? No different
Yeah.
than if two Jews had a son, they named it Moses, then you wouldn't interpret Exodus about their son. So if a bunch of Jews came together and created a country and called it Israel, why would you interpret scriptural verses about Israel referring to this particular country?
Yeah, that's one. Then on top of that, if you're going to stick so hardcore to genealogy, then at least there's got to be some shame, because we obviously know that after thousands of years of exile and mixing and whatever, these are not the same Israelites of the modern day Ashkenazi Jews who are just predominantly European and barely have any, if any, Israelite blood. Yemenites do, Mizrahi Jews do, but even those
Sephardic.
guys are often suppressed by Israeli state.
Right. And the verse here is very, very clear. It says, I will bless those who bless you, and in
You,
him who
the person,
dishonors you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Right? All the
on
families of
earth.
the earth. And this is just the beginning of the promise to Abram, which is going to be expounded upon later on in the following chapters and verses. We're going to see exactly what this means. This is the beginning of the prophecies that lead to Jesus, who is Israel as a person.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, interesting. But yeah, no, I just wanted to cover that because that was fairly new in the culture. And what else is there? Let's see. Then the Lord appeared to Abram. To your offspring, I will give this land to your offspring. So he built there, and then becomes very, very interesting, obviously, as he ends up having a couple of offsprings.
We're going to end up seeing Shechem again. We're going to see the oak again. We'll see Bethel again. This is the beginnings of the word Bethlehem, right? Where
Yeah.
Jesus was born.
And I'm
So this is
curious.
all.
I was gonna say I'm curious to see what you. I know you sarcastically said something about the oak, the silent oak, but curious to see what you have to say about the oak, or how, because I think I'm not sure if I've said this on this podcast, like how the name came to me and why I felt so strongly that the name got to be silent oak, but it was definitely very divinely guided.
I think it absolutely was.
Abram and Sarai in Egypt. Oh, I hate this. Oh, I'm gonna shred this. Hate the story.
So, but he continued a journey. So he passes through Canaan, which makes perfect sense for your theory of where he's coming from, because he's heading south, which goes directly through this region, eventually towards Egypt. And as we see here, there's a famine in the land, which makes sense if we're talking about that 4.2 kiloyear event that created famines all over the world. The timeline for Abram is around 2000 BC. And that's universally agreed upon, is roughly around 2000 BC, which also makes sense from an astrological perspective, but we'll get to that in a few chapters later on. But it aligns perfectly with the shifting from the age of Taurus to the age of Aries. Okay, Abram and Sarai in Egypt. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, which is like pitching a tent, kind of being almost a vagrant. For the famine was severe in the land, which is Canaan. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a beautiful woman in appearance. How sweet. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will try to kill me, but they will let you live. So essentially, they'll kill me so they can take you. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful indeed. And when the princes of the Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, which literally translates as slaves, female servants, slaves, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
My blood is boiling. My blood is boiling. What kind of a BS story this is for some kind of a forefather? Okay, so here's the atheist gonna come out. The prior atheist. This is why I say Christians have completely done disservice to accept the Old Testament as part of Christianity. It just should be the New Testament. Don't worry about the origin story. You know the origin story. It's been written in many other cultures. This is insane to me. So he pimps out his wife because he's a coward who's afraid of death. He's afraid they're going to kill him and take his wife. So he then says, you know what? You'll go whore to this Pharaoh so that I get to collect riches and stay alive and have all this wealth. And then the Pharaoh clearly is a very reasonable and much better, morally much better person, because he realizes that somebody's wife and is like, dude, what the F did you just do to me? Like, why did you bring this curse upon me by lying and giving me your wife when she's already married, right? Like, the far better person here is the Pharaoh. Sarai is whoring. And Abraham is a coward and a pimp and a greedy person who's collecting wealth. He's just lying and cheating and collecting wealth while pimping out his wife. This is a horrific story. And there's like, I've tried to look at this story from a million perspectives, and I don't think anyone can change my mind on this. This is a horrendous story.
Well, what's funny is that we see the same type of thing happen again in the next chapters. The same, telling people, "Oh, this is my sister," and now it doesn't specifically say anywhere that any wedding was actually consummated, right? It implies that might have been attempted or was getting planned for.
No,
but yeah, I mean, the idea is they go into Egypt.
He says, when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. That's,
Could be.
Yeah,
I mean, it says, "Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister?"
Why
so
else?
I took her for my wife. Now you can interpret it as being they hadn't yet consummated, or you can interpret it as they did consummate it.
No, that to me it's absolutely like consummated, because he says, "I took her as my wife." Like that. What? How else could it possibly mean? It says, "I took her for my wife," but she was already your wife. That is. It's as clear as day. Like, there's no room for reinterpretation for me there, because that's what those words mean. I took her for my wife, and that cursed me.
I'm not telling you that's a wrong interpretation. That, like, the text says that's a wrong interpretation. It's open for both ways of looking at it. And there's nothing in it that says it has to be one way or the other than tradition, right? Other than tradition.
So the tradition doesn't want to see it the way it's written. Ththe just trying to
doesn't want to see it that particular way, right? Now, one thing I do want to point out that's important is that all of the people in the Bible are not supposed to be mentioned or not supposed to be looked at as perfect founding fathers of a religion. In fact, as you go through the Old Testament, you see that a lot of these people are terrible people. They have horrible ideas. They make terrible mistakes. They take advantage of people. People know about David and Bathsheba, right? And he basically murders her husband so that he can take her as his wife. I mean, the people of the Old Testament are clearly written to be people with major faults who do terrible things. Mm-hmm. And so, if we assume that the stories of the Old Testament are all about all these holy, amazing people who are holy all their entire life, then we're going to come away reading the stories as, well, clearly that's not the case, because it's not supposed to be the case. This is actually a story of many, many people who had terrible issues, but it is through these imperfect people that God still uses them in order to build his kingdom on earth. So he's not finding perfect people and saying, you're perfect, so therefore I choose you. He's picking particular people for other reasons, even extremely, extremely imperfect people, and still saying, you are someone that I can use to build something good here on earth, even though you have all of your faults.
So here's where, it's like we live in such a politically sensitive place that I'm so hesitant to say this, but I'm going to have to say it, because let's just pretend this isn't the Jewish lens and the Jewish foundation and the culture and the Jewish version, right? Of the story. But what's going on here is actually the beginning. God wasn't choosing horrendous people. God was choosing Noah, who was literally the only one left that was good. God was constantly choosing good people. That was the point. And then all of a sudden, chapter 12 shifts into this new era, new framework, new lens, and it becomes the Jewish history, the Jewish story. And then all of a sudden it just goes straight into cheating, stealing, pimping out wives, and it continues with Jacob, with like one and other, and then it's just like you're like, what is going on over here? And it's just really, it's really hard not to tie back to current day conspiracies. It's really hard not to. You're like, wait a minute. All people keep doing sometimes is saying, hey, there seems to be something shady going on here. And then we're told, no, these are the God's chosen people. You're hateful for noticing anything wrong with it. And then the book is saying the exact same thing. It just literally goes and, he's God's choice, but yet just extremely faulty. Obviously, this doesn't extend to all regular Jews. I'm talking about those who often, I'm talking about the type of Jews that are the Rothschilds of this world, or the Netanyahus of this world, or the elites that have really influenced and inspired a lot of where the story goes, all the way to where and how Americans view that story, because America being the biggest empire in the world. So it's really hard for me all of a sudden not to just be like, wait a minute, like it's a weird, convenient build-up happening here, and it's not too far away from the certain criticisms that people try to voice and get shut down or called anti-Semitic that exist till today. Like, I have to say that.
There are things like this that are pulled into a lot of, like you said, conspiracies, and you can read into it a particular way like that. And there is a lot of deception that goes on through the Old Testament. We'll see this in the coming stories. And there's certain deception that ends up working to the benefit of the people, and there's certain deception that ends up damaging, their history,
but that's also
and where they're going, and their relation with God.
That's also very parallel to the Jewish history, right? They have so many, they have done so many revolts, and in return they've been massacred and exiled because of their own revolts that just fired back. They also have accomplished a lot of things, but then they've both accomplished immense amount of power and wealth and reputation, as well as constantly have been prosecuted and in a way punished for it. But there's just definitely some sort of interesting parallels there. And the reason why it's, I think, important is because an average person, let's say, religious Jewish person, especially those who grew up in Jewish schools, they're just, very closed-knit community. They're not, let's say, the New York City Jews who are out and about in the world, right? Like, there's a reason probably why so many of them actually, what they take away from the book, they end up sounding like hardcore Zionists. Or like there's this one religious Jewish person was just like one day, Lord, basically the Messiah will come and all the whatever they believe in will just take place, and then every single Jew in the world will have 2,800 slaves each, and they will rule the world. You're like, okay, my problem only comes from seeing this craziness in the book, then seeing some people, granted, because Jews are not, they're very intelligent people, it's not a big percentage of them who would take this as an outcome, but there is definitely a percentage of them who actually end up truly believing that they're just can do whatever, they're God's people. And that's problematic, because every time I discuss Islam and I criticize Islam, it's for exact same reasons. Because an average Muslim might never read the Quran and might be a perfectly good human being, right? That's just no different than any other. But then there is good enough percentage that reads the Quran and acts on it. And when they act on it, it looks really ugly. So if someone reads this and acts on this, takes away that whatever I'm taking away from it, that God can protect such assholes, then there are a percentage of people going to take away and be like, yeah, I'm God's chosen people and I'm going to just get away with anything. You know what I'm saying?
Well, this is an important point here that I really want to make and hammer home, is that all religious texts can be interpreted in multiple ways. Sometimes it's very clear, and sometimes when it's ambiguous, it leaves room for alternative ideas, right? Which is why we have so many different denominations and ways of looking at things. And yeah, there's a particular way of reading this that makes Abram look like a horrible person. That like his whole plan was to pimp out his wife, so that way he could deceive, the Pharaoh, and then get a bunch of his stuff, right? I mean, that's one way of reading it.
Well,
And
even if we don't read in a way that he set out to do that, right? It just accidentally happened. All of a sudden, how many times does it have to happen until you realize a pattern that you can actually do this now?
so,
You know what I'm saying?
and I want to bring up the idea when Jesus was tempted by Satan in the wilderness. Satan tempted him with scripture, right? He said, doesn't it say in the scripture X, Y, and Z? And the way that Jesus responded was with a different scripture saying that, no, that's the wrong interpretation. This is the correct interpretation, right? And so even Jesus was tempted with scripture with an alternative interpretation of it, right? So it's not, it's not beyond reason that through scripture, people can come away with really wrong ideas about what it is like to be right with God, right? And that's how so many people have used their faith and their religion in order to do horrible travesties throughout all of human history. But I do want to say here, if we are going to take Abram's side in the story, then we have to look at when he says, they're going to Egypt because there's a famine in Canaan, they're going to starve. And Egypt's the only place where there's food. So they go down to Egypt. And if we take what he says seriously, he says, look, when we get to Egypt, they're going to kill me. Like, they're going to kill me to steal you, which means the promise that God gave to me is going to be over with. They're going to take you, and then you're going to be their captive. You're going to be stuck with them, right? So the only way that we're going to be able to survive, the only way that I'm not going to get killed and you're not going to be taken and our whole tribe is not going to be scattered, is if you tell everyone that you're my sister. And then they're going to try to take you as, as their wife, and then we'll figure out something if they try to do that. Otherwise, if I don't do this, we're all going to be completely destroyed. If I don't tell them you're my sister, our whole tribe is going to be destroyed. So this is the only way we can survive in Egypt. And if we take that seriously, I mean, if that was, the realistic scenario, that's the only thing he could have done, other than starve in Canaan or be killed by the Egyptians. That's the way the story is being presented, right? So, like, the way that the listener at the time would understand the story, the way it's structured, is that this is the only option that Abram had in order to make sure that he isn't killed and the rest of his tribe isn't completely destroyed and scattered. That was the only option he had. And it turned out, according to the way that the story is written, that it actually worked. Not only did it work, but they ended up being sent out of Egypt with a whole bunch of stuff, right? They went in there knowing that they're about to die. And the only way not to die is to say that, his wife is his sister. And
They
to prevent
cursed
themselves from
the
being
place. They cursed the place, took their wealth, and left. There's
killed. Who
like,
cursed?
huh?
Who cursed?
His lie caused plague. Cursed the Pharaoh, caused plague.
Well, the question is, what caused the plague? Was it the lie, or was it the fact that the Egyptians were such a savage people that they would kill someone just to take his wife? Right? So who's really initiating the wrong here?
So first of all, one is a total assumption, right? So, and very self-serving, because if they liked her so much, they're just going to take her just like they still took her, right? If she's going to be a sex slave, she's a sex slave. Doesn't matter if willing or unwilling.
The difference is that, they would kill him and that would scatter the whole tribe, right?
The difference is they would have killed him, and he's such an honorable person to worry so much about his own mortality and push his wife forward. It's kind of like when what do you do if you encounter a bear? Push your friend forward and run. So that's what's happening here. The thing is, there are some things in the scripture that's definitely hard to understand, and it's definitely could be misinterpreted in so many ways. This is not one of those. This is as black and white as the Quran is with commands. And in here, it talks about himself. He says, me, not us, not our tribe, He says me. If we believe in other places that Bible is extremely specific in the language it chooses, then why are we falling short to believe the same thing here? If the language that's chosen is specific, then it says that I know you're a beautiful woman, so this is my wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. But they will let you live. He knows that she'll be just fine. So say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared of your sake. This cannot be just coincidentally, just somehow Bible is so specific to be very careful with what words it chooses, and all of a sudden it's just like me, and then, oh, that's not what he means. No, that's what it's saying. And then they will let you live. We know that. When Abram entered the Egyptians saw the woman, okay. And then they took her, and for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep and donkeys and basically all this wealth. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai. So it says it right there. So now we're not supposed to take the word anymore. But the Lord caused a plague because of her, Abram's wife. So the Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife?" This cannot go more black and white as a story. How can we possibly create an apologetics version of a story that's just not there?
Well, I mean, I disagree completely, because the very fact where he mentions that the Egyptians will kill him and take her, right? And this is, you could say, oh, that's just an assumption.
That's
but
not a very
why would he have
honorable man if he's so worried about his own death that he knows his wife's going to be fine, but no, he just says, go whore around.
But there's two ways. So if it were written, let's say, if the story was that his intention was to whore her out, then he would never have mentioned being killed. It would be like, hey, we're going to go to Egypt. Why don't you?
Okay, so then he's just a
rich?
coward. Okay, fine. That's not any better.
I would say, again, like, for instance, if you were set in a situation where either you're going to get killed and your whole family is going to be completely taken advantage of, right? Or there's the only alternative is to say, hey, you just say you're my sister. That way we don't get destroyed, and we'll figure it out from there. This is his only option. Like, they're going to starve in Canaan. They go to Egypt. He says, look, the way that the ancient world works, because this is very, very common. We're sojourners. We're from another land. They could kill us and no one would do anything because we're travelers. Nobody knows who we are. We're just this random tribe that showed up in Egypt. There's no one here to protect us. And it's very, very common in the ancient times just to go out and murder people and take what you want. So he's like, look, we're going to be destroyed. But if I say that you're my sister, then they won't kill us, and maybe we'll be able to get out of here alive. Now, it's interesting here because the question is, who's really the evil person, right? Abram for trying to find a way to survive, or the Egyptians for having a society that's willing to kill strangers to take their wives? And because the Egyptians have a society who are willing to kill strangers to take their wife, right? They are the ones who end up getting plagued because they have. So imagine that they didn't have a society like that. Imagine that they were very welcoming people and they wouldn't be willing to do such horrible things, right? Then
it doesn't
right, then
particularly. It doesn't particularly.
They wouldn't
be
set up for any type of punishment for having that particular society.
There's nothing here that says that was particularly to Egyptian society, rather in general the state of the world. The state of the world is that people can kill and steal and whatever.
Right.
So now they're the ones going into a place where they're foreigners and they're just coming in, and it says it's not accidental that it says they will let you live. It's not accidental. Right. That it's clear that it's about him. It's not about the tribe. I care so much about my wife and the kids and everybody else. No, it's about him, and even says they will let you live, and doesn't say anything about they will let her live, but in a what way? Because
Well,
how much
if
worse
let's
can it
say,
be than her being taken advantage of, just like she is
well, let
willfully given to be taken
well, let's
advantage
say
of?
he's right, but he didn't do that. They go into Egypt, they kill him, they take his wife. Let's say the family isn't dispersed, then the Bible ends there.
Yeah,
Chapter's
maybe you should
closed.
have.
There's
Maybe you
no
should have.
story. So there was no lineage there. And so they go into a place to try to survive. They're again threatened to be killed. And what ends up happening, you have parallels here again with the plague. So the whole story we're going to see the same pattern being repeated with Joseph going into Egypt, and we're going to see the same pattern again with the Jews going to Egypt with Moses. They go into Egypt and they end up coming out of Egypt with great wealth because the Egyptians, particularly in Exodus, mistreated everyone, right? And because of their mistreatment, they end up because of the way their society was functioning, they end
That's
up getting
also,
punished through plagues,
yeah.
and then the Jews end up leaving Egypt with lots of wealth. And eventually we see it with Jesus as a child. He ends up going into Egypt and ends up coming out of Egypt as well. I mean, we see this going in and out of Egypt as a pattern repeating here over and over and over again. But,
Yeah.
stuck between a rock and a hard place is the takeaway here for this story that Abram's, it's either he's going to die and his wife's going to be taken and she's going to be basically the forced slave of Egypt for the rest of her life, or they can try to find a way to survive. So why don't you tell him you're my sister and we'll figure out what's going to happen. She ends up being taken anyway. At least Abram survived. But then the whole point of the story here, but the Lord ends up coming to his rescue, right? God ends up sending a plague to Pharaoh saying, hey, and Pharaoh's like, well, what the hell's going on? And ends up giving his wife back saying, get the hell out of here. And then they end up leaving him
Yeah,
with a
and
lot
if
of
they were,
profit.
here's the thing, the nuance is extremely important here to me because it's extremely important. If Egyptians were such the bad, we have to remember this is the perspective of the, if I'm telling Naira's story, I'm going to be the hero of my story.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So this is being told from the perspective of, Jewish lineage. So hence, whatever happens is going to be they're the hero of the story. But the nuance of the language is extremely important because if Egyptians were so bad, after they found out what's going on, they would have killed everybody. If they were so, they wouldn't just let them take all the wealth and your wife. Here's everything you could possibly want and not need. Here, just leave. No, that's not an action of a bad person. That's actually a very honorable act. So the only dishonorable act here is Abraham allowing, and again, the language, it says, and for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. So it's not like this is not just 1, 2, 3 days and then everything just boils over. No. Abram gives his wife as a wife to another. So
I would
someone
say he
else.
doesn't give. He doesn't go out offering her, like looking for a husband.
No,
Right.
because the
He's just
second
saying
you
this is my.
say, here's the thing, you say, that's my
He,
sister, that means she's a single woman, she's available. And
it,
all of a sudden, what people used to do in the past, trade women for wealth and, for good standing. Families would marry women off to create national treaties or this or that. So he very well knows what he's doing. He lies and says that's my sister, which means she's available and she's a beautiful woman. He acknowledges she's a beautiful woman. It's just, I'm supposed to somehow, I have to take the words the way they are, and the way the
but
words are
he never offers her. Like he's not selling her. Like he's not
is
offering her
not
up. It just
selling
says
her. But
it
he
just
says
says
you're a
that Pharaoh.
beautiful woman. They'll kill me if they know you're my wife.
Right. Now, keep in mind Pharaoh's king, and he's in Pharaoh's land. And if Pharaoh
Yeah.
says, "I want her as my wife," is he able to say no? Otherwise, Pharaoh's going to kill all of them. Right. You got to say yes to the king. Right. So you're in his land. You show up. You're like, well, the locals are going to kill me if I say you're my wife. So you're my sister. Then Pharaoh shows up, and Pharaoh's like, so that's kind of what's the implication here. So first, Abram is afraid
Yeah,
that the
but
locals are
maybe
going to
they
kill him.
were very wrong, clearly, because if they're the one telling the story, I'm supposed to be on their side. It's kind of like when a girlfriend comes crying, talking about how horrible her husband is, but she's the one telling the story, yet she's wrong. Like, you're hearing her side of the story, and you're like, holy crap, how the hell did your poor husband
Right.
deal with you? Right now, this is one of those stories that I'm supposed to be be somehow taking their side because this is the story told through their lens, yet they're just unaware how wrong this is, and the fact that if the Pharaoh was such a horrific person, so maybe they were mistaken. Maybe they thought
So
Pharaoh is a monster, but clearly Pharaoh is not a monster. And even in Moses, Pharaoh is not a monster because it's God who's constantly hardening his heart. God keeps messing with it.
well, we'll get to that Pharaoh later on. But yeah, any story we read is going to be written from the perspective of the people who wrote it, right? I mean, that's a given.
Yeah.
So,
But even
that's
through their
just the way it's
perspective,
always
it's not favoring them.
that's the way it's always going to be. But the way that the story it works, the way it's written, and for the listener to understand at the time, is Abram. Well, first of all, God never tells them to go to Egypt; they go on their own, right? God just tells them basically to the land of Canaan. It never says that God sent them down to Egypt. They went down to Egypt because there was a famine and they're afraid of starving. So they go down to Egypt. Abram's afraid that the locals are going to kill him because they're strangers, they're foreigners. They're going to kill him and take his wife and destroy the family. So he says, just tell him you're my sister and we'll be safe. So they tell him right here, say you're my sister. And they didn't kill him. They're like, fine, we're safe. But then it mentions they told the Pharaoh that there's this beautiful woman. Then the Pharaoh came in and the Pharaoh says, I want her as my wife. Now, Pharaoh's king. Pharaoh can do whatever he wants, right? You could tell the
But
locals
also, the Pharaoh thinks she's a single woman.
sure, you can tell the locals that, she's my sister, and then they won't kill you. But when Pharaoh comes, Pharaoh can have whatever the hell he wants. And he says, I want her as my wife. You can't tell Pharaoh no, right? Now, now she has to be taken, right? Abram has no choice in this matter. And if he says, well, actually, she's my wife, then the locals are going to kill him, right? So either the locals kill him, but then Pharaoh comes, you can't say no to Pharaoh. So really, he's, like I said, rock and hard place. So Pharaoh takes the wife. It never says that Abram gives it. Because in the ancient time, you had to actually offer the woman up. You have to actually say, okay, we agree that the woman is now your wife, and there's going to be a dowry trade usually or something. None of that's mentioned. Basically, Pharaoh shows up. She's gorgeous. She's mine. Nothing you can do about it. Takes her into his house. And then immediately there's plagues. And Pharaoh's wondering, why the hell are there plagues happening? Finds out that this is his sister. And the thought process, or his wife, Abram's wife, and the thought process Pharaoh goes is, okay, clearly this tribe's God is powerful and I'm pissing off their God and they just need to get the hell out of my land. Like I'm king and I could kill all of them. Like he could be so mad that he would just kill all of them. But he's afraid of the power of the God that tribe has because there's already plagues just for taking Abram's wife.
Yeah.
So he gives Abram's wife back, says, you know what, get out of here, go and leave. And what this is setting up is the stage of that in Egypt and out of Egypt story that we see repeated here. But the way I read the story is very clear that Abram essentially had no other choice. Otherwise, the family would be killed. And he thought he'd been able to survive because he told the locals that it was his sister. But when Pharaoh showed up, Pharaoh's king, can't do anything about it. You're SOL. All right, I guess you're taking my wife. Probably praise God. Hey, God, please do something to bring my wife back. Plagues happen, and then they end up being sent out.
Yeah, that's a lot of assumptions and insertions that isn't there for me at all because it's just not in the story. And the
I
story
think
is
that's exactly
so
how the
well.
story reads.
Huh?
I think that's exactly how the story reads.
No, yeah. Yeah, I mean, not for me because, first of all, lying is bad. That's just a dishonorable thing right there. So you're lying,
Well,
that's
if
wrong,
someone was
already
threatening
wrong.
to kill you or kill your
Doesn't
family
matter.
member,
That
and the
when
only way to
people
save their
say
life was to lie,
no,
then
when
what would you
that's
do?
there's no conditions for being honorable. That the people literally the freaking Japanese samurais, they would kill themselves over much less than that. So
No,
honor.
that's true. I mean, so you can get into Kantian ethics. Would you lie to save the whole world is usually the kind of the trolley experiment. Would you tell a small lie to save all the people on the planet? That's the thought experiment about ethics when it comes to telling the truth or not. But again, this is what he did. He wasn't told to go to
This is
Egypt,
supposed
but
to be a person blessed by God. This is supposed to be someone who is blessed by God and he's going to be forefather of many nations. Doesn't anywhere say that God commands him or tells him to lie to survive. Obviously, he's doing
no,
this
you're
on
right.
his own.
You're
He
right.
just he just lied on his own. He says, "I recognize you're a beautiful woman. They're gonna see you and they're gonna kill me. They will let you live." And then Pharaoh, of course, does see, but why wouldn't Pharaoh? That's a beautiful woman, just arrived, and there's a brother, and he absolutely is generous. He gives him so much power, donkeys, servants, slaves. He treats him exactly, and extremely well. He takes her as a wife. That's a good sign. That's not a small thing.
Well,
It doesn't say he takes her as a, I don't know, concubine. It takes her as his wife, the Pharaoh's wife. That's not a bad person. There's nowhere it says that Pharaoh figured out, or their God talked to him, or anything of that sort. It just says that
he suffered
God.
great plagues because of it. And,
Say what?
why else would he have suffered great plagues? Right?
No, but it
He's
doesn't
clearly
say.
associating the plagues with taking Sarai.
But this is
So he's
being
like, okay,
narrated.
clearly,
This is being.
yeah, he's clearly seeing Sarai and this tribe of Abrams and their God, because everyone at the time thought each individual tribes had their own gods. Right? And so when he sends them off, again, like, he's like, all right, you leave. Here's a bunch of stuff. Don't let your God get pissed at me anymore. Get out of here. Right.
Here's the thing. Nowhere it says there's any intricate, like any. We're being narrated that God did this. God brought plague. Not God let them. We're being narrated. God caused the plague.
Yeah, that's the way Pharaoh, yeah.
It's not like Pharaoh thought
God
about
caused
it.
The plague, right.
It's not like
God
Pharaoh
caused the plague.
thought it must
my
be their
point,
God. Sorry.
Yeah, my point is that, we're sorry. It's a delay. But my point is that God brought the plagues. Pharaoh believed that God brought the plagues. It says it right there. Right? And this is Yahweh. It says Yahweh. So this is the God of the tribe of Abram. And he's like, okay, their God brought plagues on me because I took his wife. I'm afraid of this God now because this God is clearly
You're making assumptions. That's not there. Okay. So,
well, let's think about
but the
it.
Lord,
if he wasn't afraid
hold on. We're being narrated to. This is not the Lord saying to Pharaoh or showing Pharaoh or telling Abraham or showing Abraham. We're being narrated that God afflicted Pharaoh and his house a great plague. There's no mention anywhere that God communicated with any of them to figure out what's going on. But people back in the day were very superstitious. Even the ancient cultures today are very superstitious. They might be like, what is this? Like, they're trying to find the purpose and reason why something happened. And they're like, the only new thing that is new variable in our environment are these people. So just get the hell out of here. So it doesn't, there's nothing about God. They might not even recognize or know that there's God. Pharaohs obviously oftentimes thought they are gods. So, but what I'm saying is they just did not touch them or do anything, and they said you can take all your wealth, all your wife, everything, and just get the hell out of here. And you lied to me. It literally says, why would you have done this to me? Why did you tell me she was your wife? In this story, no matter how anyone tries to twist, the Egyptian Pharaoh does not become the bad guy here, like in any way.
He took Sarai without any. There's nothing in there that he took her with the agreement of Abram. Like there was no trade of dowry.
Because Abram did not say I'm her father. He said I'm your brother, and this is completely normal. No, there's no mention that he just took her as against her will.
It just says Pharaoh took her as his wife. That's it, right? So.
Takes her as her wife, and then because of her, he treats him extremely well. That suggests that everything was harmonious.
No.
Yes. I'm applying this through the lens of ancient cultures. Do you know there's 20 years ago, this kind of stuff was still present in my culture, like giving and taking women. So this is very, very familiar type of ancientness that happens. So yes, if he was the father, or he was also a pharaoh, brother. If it was also lord of a nation, then they would have an exchange and whatever. But if he comes in and that's just a beautiful woman, the wife, the fact he gave him riches and shows great treatment, that's rare. That speaks of a really, honorable pharaoh. In fact, if anything, it says that, the princess saw her and then basically praised her to the pharaoh. Basically, it just almost sets up a scene where somebody saw her and liked her, and then it's like, oh, dude, have you seen this woman? And then she brought her to her house, and it's just there's nothing that showcases of some force or taking just because he wants to or this or that. It seems extremely honorable from the Pharaoh side and extremely, extremely horrendous from the Abraham side and Sarai.
If if there wasn't a culture where Abram would be killed, right? That's where the original sin is here. You're in an area in
That
a
was
time
in
period
every
too.
every history. That was everybody in the world at some
Correct. No, no, that's the
point.
point. No. That's my point. Is that when you sojourn into a new land, the way the ancient world worked is that they would just kill you and take your stuff. Right? They would kill a man and take his wife, and so he sojourned into Egypt. Doesn't say God sent him, so maybe it was his own idea. He goes in there, and now he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. He's afraid of starving in Canaan, which is where he's supposed to be, where God sent him. But he left there because he doesn't trust God anymore. You could interpret it as he doesn't trust God to protect him. So there's a famine, so he goes to Egypt. Now he's stuck between a rock and a hard place where he can die and this tribe can be destroyed. So he lies to the locals to protect himself. And basically, now he's in the position where Pharaoh stole his wife, and he doesn't have anything. He's got nothing, no way to fix it. And so God basically rescues him out of this rock and hard place, sends a plague to Pharaoh, Pharaoh says, "Oh, you guys have a powerful God. All right, well, get the hell out of here. I don't want to upset your God anymore." And Abram never should have even gone to Egypt in the first place, but he does. And
Well,
so God ends up
yeah.
saving him despite him I think kind of the takeaway here from my perspective is the moral of the story is that even when you walk into a place you're not supposed to be and put yourself in a bad position, God can rescue you. And that's kind of a repeated theme, I think, throughout the Bible in a lot of ways. Even when you put yourself in a bad position, if you appeal to God, he can still rescue you.
Yeah,
Because
for
we usually
me,
put ourselves in bad positions.
yeah, for me that's extremely, extremely convenient because immediately I no longer can at all look at this book as anything. Well, I've always said this actually, this, but I don't look at this book as anything like sacred or true word of God, obviously, or anything like that. It's a story told through a particular lens, and that particular lens, it makes perfect sense. It's extremely, extremely convenient to just get away with just about anything. And it is not, it's not at all related to Christianity and Christian values. It's such a horrendous story, and there's just no other way for me to see that. And but we're getting very long and circular. We already
Yeah.
probably went through each point a million
Well,
times.
and I think, yeah, at the end of the day, there's three ways to interpret this. One is that, uh, well, whether or not you believe it was intentional, like let's go in there and deceive them and take a bunch of their stuff and leave, or you believe it that, whatever way, the less than nice way of interpreting the story. Either way, the Old Testament's full of faulty people. That's the whole point, right? It's not a story of wonderful, righteous people who always make the right decisions. It's a story of people who make terrible decisions. And the entire story of Israel and the Jewish people are people who continuously make horrible decisions. God says, do good things. And then they go and start sacrificing their babies to other gods. And God says, stop doing that. And then they say, okay, we'll stop. And then they do it again. It's like repeatedly over and over. You have bad people and God's trying to rescue them, and they keep making bad mistakes. So even if you decide you want to interpret the story in a less than beneficial light to Abram, that he actually was kind of being selfish, it doesn't necessarily take away from the entirety of the story, the idea of the story itself, which is God taking even faulty people with sinful natures and taking them and making something good out of them. Even taking someone who's selfish, if you want to interpret it as Abram being a selfish person who whores out his wife, God can still take someone who's like that and mold that person into a righteous person. So even if you wanted to interpret it that way, you could still have a takeaway where God's still the good guy taking, because honestly, we're all terrible people. And the whole idea is to be molded by God from a terrible person into a righteous person. And we'll see Abram becomes more and more righteous as the story progresses.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, I don't know about that, but I don't see that because we don't have other, there's all those lineages. We don't have the story of the other lineage and the other lineage and the other. Like we have just one. We have one lineage telling the story at this point. It's not particularly as universal at this point anymore. And then
We'll get to, go ahead.
And then as we hit Exodus, I remember reading the Exodus and I'm like, yeah, no shit, Islam came to life. Like, who wouldn't see this rhetoric and not create their own religious supremacy and be like, F you, what the, what's going on here? Because it's just insane. Like, this is why I think the world is so divided and so many things have offshooted from this ideology versus the other, and then cherry on top, Jesus comes and says like, yo guys, like, calm the hell down, what the hell is going on over here? Like, can you not realize from Abraham till now you keep making mistakes, you keep doing the same worst horrible things, and keep getting punished and freaking massacred and exiled? Get a grip. Like, can we all? And then they said, nope, die. It's just like, what? What? And then till today, fringe minority of them talk as if there's a Messiah gonna come and they're gonna rule the world and this and that. But then, God forbid you say that. God forbid you suggest that they said that. Then you're a terrible person. And, it's just. Outcomes matter so much. When I look at the world and the same exact crap we've been dealing with in the books that we're dealing with till today, then you're just like, okay, again, outcomes matter. So we have to just look at it from the outcome perspective as well, not just isolated to the book and that time. You're like, okay, what has this tribe, people, person, whatever, learned? Let's take a look. Looks like they've become a perfect split between truly fantastic people and still the crazy fringe radicals who hang on to this kind of a weird rhetoric where they just, somehow think they can get away with anything. And then in the process, the rest of their people keep getting hurt. In this case, Sarai gets thrown into the den of, doesn't anywhere say whether she liked it or not. Maybe this is not this is not
Maybe
okay.
Like, no, don't send me back to Abram. I like it with Pharaoh. It's a beautiful palace. No,
it's just I know I'm not. One day it will come together where I will be able to articulate myself perfectly well, because I'm positive it sounds so broken and fragmented and possibly wrong, but I don't care at this point. I just want to start slowly thinking this through, because if I look at Islam, when people come and say, oh no, you see, that's not how you read the Quran, you're supposed to read it this way because this is what was meant, you're like, I'm gonna look at the outcome. The outcome is jihad Allah and you blow something up, let's say, obviously not all. If that exists, if someone can read that book and blow something up in the name of that book, and then the book you read and says exactly a lot of these things that approves it, I'm going to say that's a horrendous ideology and something that needs to be dealt with, something that needs to be relooked at, reformed, whatever you want to say. But to just say, no, you're a hateful person because you're seeing this wrong, that's not what it says that, but that's not what it means. No, I'm going to look at the outcome, not the isolated word.
I mean, the repeated story over and over is the Jews rebelling against God. Him giving them their laws, they start following it, but then they rebel against him, all the way up to Jesus, where they rebel against God himself and kill him. And it kind of makes sense.
And they're still rebelling.
It kind of makes sense, right? It kind of makes sense to pick a tribe that's going to, if the culmination of the foundation of the world is God sacrificing himself for the cosmos, right? You would need your people to kill you when you incarnate. Then it makes sense to pick a tribe that keeps rebelling against you. Because eventually you're going to incarnate and you need that tribe to rebel against you to kill you so that you can show the world that you're willing to sacrifice yourself for their cause. It would even make sense to pick the Jews. Maybe he picked them specifically because they're a type of people in this history who would rebel against him, who would follow him and then rebel, because that way when he incarnates, they do rebel and they kill him so he can show the world that he's willing to die for all of humanity. Maybe that's the very reason why he picked the Jews.
Or maybe he picked the Jews because it's like, okay, these are the most stubborn mofos in the world. That's going to be, if I succeed with these guys, kind of like that saying goes, if you succeed in New York, you succeed anywhere.
I can succeed with anyone.
If I succeed with these guys, I'll succeed anywhere. Then that means we've reached world peace. I don't know. Something just is not right here.
I mean, it's a fun conspiracy to make out of it because you could continue it on throughout the passages where it's just, oh, this is a story of people who keep deceiving, lots of deception over and over and over again.
But that's
And
what
that's
keeps
how some
happening.
people interpret it. The people who are very anti-Jewish interpret it that way, and
Don't
there's some
say
Jews who
that.
interpret it that way too.
Don't say that. So that was my biggest criticism when they just people throw in the anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish. It is not anti-Jewish when I'm reading the book and the book says effed up shit, and then
No,
I'm
no, no.
like,
I'm not saying. I'm saying there are some people who are very anti-Jewish who interpret it this way. There are also some Jews like who interpret it this way as well. Very small minority who want power, just like a lot of some Christians will interpret things in a way that justifies their thirst for power. Right?
so though that minority of Jews that interpret it that way who want power is the people that I talk about. So
Right.
not the Jewish people, and definitely
Yeah,
not the
and that's not
religious people
exclusive to
who
any
don't even
particular
accept
group.
Israel. Yeah.
Right. It's not
So
particular in any particular group of people. It's just the devil within all of us.
yeah, but then that small minority of people aren't powerless or small, right? Because
Right.
they're quite
But
powerful. And
when you thirst for power, you end up getting it a lot of times.
exactly. And if you then figure out a perfect way to say to take this and think this is what you got to do, then turn around and tell anyone who sees it that way that you're hateful, anti-Semitic, and then use the people, regardless whether they're with it or not. Because let's accept, like, let's say if the Rothschild Empire, I'm going to call it the Rothschild Empire because their name is everywhere in history from the dawn of time.
You just say the Illuminati.
Is the Illuminati like specifically linking to the Jewish elites? Because Rothschilds.
Well, it depends on which conspiracy theory you want to go down.
Oh, I don't
there's
even know the
100 of them,
traditional
so.
conspiracies, but I'm just saying, like, let's say the Rothschild, more I read about history, they appear to be more like an empire rather than just a family, right? They're the Rothschild Empire. And Israel almost seems to be also, this is allegedly, this is my own speculations, seems to be because they were behind the Balfour Declaration, they were behind every single step of the way until the creation of Israel, they were behind the Schofield Bible. So all of this is just to establish this empire that many Jews actually do not see it the same way. Many Jews are basically, the regular people get used towards this goal just because because the language is Jewish, right? And then it's confused between Judaism versus ethnicity, and then there's all this thing. So then all of a sudden you cannot distinguish between who's who. But then it turns out that the small percentage of like a small family or a multi-family that create the small percentage all of a sudden are puppeteering, and on top of that, everyday regular person gets sucked into that under that same umbrella, which then at some point the world gets crazy and cannot separate any of them, and then something horrendous happens. So it's like a perpetual cycle of some sort.
I think at the end of the day, this story, no matter how you interpret it, whether Abram is a bad
Retarded
person
or
or
not.
just someone, yeah, whether he's retarded or evil, either way, God can take someone like that, take you and mold you into a great person.
I think he's
Whether
just a
you're evil or
coward.
retarded.
I think he's just a coward. Later, it turns a little bit into evil when I can't remember. I think Jacob's story turns a bit evil because then it's just literally deceiving, like setting up to deceit. So it's a natural progression, right? All of a sudden, Abram's like comes out of it and is like, whoa, okay, that worked. And then all of a sudden his son, and then so it just continually just morphs into like, ooh, I can do this and steal this. Like, let me steal my brother's blessing.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's tap into that real quick before we end this episode. So here's how this ties into the entire story of Christianity itself here. This story in particular along with all the following stories where deception is part of the story. Because like we mentioned, there's a lot of deception that happens in these following stories. And the Christian story of Jesus is Jesus. Oftentimes, it's Jesus taking on the punishment or protecting us from death, right? Or not even death, but complete annihilation. Jesus is putting himself in our position, or covering us, or switching places, whichever. It depends on the story. But the idea is Jesus ends up protecting us from total annihilation, right? And we'll see that with Jacob. We see that with Isaac. We see that with Joseph. We see that same idea of someone stepping in front of certain death in order to protect someone else. And so you're seeing the same story here, where Abram's wife, where Abram is protected from death because Sarai is presented as sister rather than wife. And it's going to kind of seem like a stretch here in this story, where this is related to Jesus taking on the fire of God, taking on the lake of fire, so that we don't have to burn. It seems like a stretch here, but as we go through the rest of the stories, you're going to see that this is actually a reflection of that story of Christ taking on the lake of fire, taking on death, so that we don't have to suffer through it. And we'll see that repeated. So that's actually in this story here. It's not as clear as the other stories, are far more clear, but it's actually hidden in this story as well.
Yeah, stretch
Abram
for me.
surviving because Sarai ends up saying, no, this is my brother, rather than this is my wife.
Well, here's the thing. The story would be very, very different if Sarai came and said, hey, they're likely going to kill you. Let me actually say I'm your sister. That would entirely shift the story. Entirely shift the honor system, the martyrdom. What am I trying to say? Martyrdom.
No, I see what you're saying. If it was her idea, I think. I mean, traditionally, it's implied that she agreed to it, because obviously she did it. It's implied that she was agreeable to the idea, but sure,
she
it would
was
be
also
more.
A woman at the time. That's
sure. It would be more. Yeah, I can see how you're saying it would be easier to take it that way if it was written as her idea, rather than just her agreeing to it.
Yeah, it's a very different story for me to sacrifice myself to save my loved one, versus for you to come and say, let me can you go do this horrendous thing for me so that I don't die, please? Thank you so much. Bye. It's a very different story.
Yeah. Well, again, no matter how you interpret it, the principle is still there. Someone sacrificing themselves in a way in order to save someone else's life. And traditionally,
hold on. That story is not there. Who sacrificed? No. She was sacrificed, not she was sacrificing. That's what I'm saying. It's actually very different.
Well, it depends on how you read it. If the traditional way to read
English
it,
words that are on the page.
Yeah. No, she is agreeable. She said, okay, let's do it. It would be easier if it was written that was her idea, but whether it was her idea or not, the fact that she agreed to it, you could interpret her as agreeing to it against her own will, but you can also interpret it as her saying, yeah, of course, it's a great idea. I don't want you to die. You're my husband. Of course, I don't want you to be killed. Yeah, I'll tell everyone you're my brother. I don't want my husband to be murdered, right? I mean, no wife wants their husband to be murdered unless their husband's a terrible husband. So of course she would agree to that. She doesn't want her husband to be killed.
Yeah, except it says, say you are my sister, that it will go well with me because of you, and that my life will be spared for your sake. And then it doesn't say anything about her agreeing or disagreeing. It's just, I don't think she has a say in the matter. She's a woman in those times. Then they enter, it doesn't say, hey, do you think it's a good idea if we do this? No, it says, say you are my sister, so I'm spared. And then they enter Egypt. Hey, I'm going to look at everything through the same lens. Meaning, if we're going to say they were very meticulous what words they use, what they're saying, what's this, what's that, then it has to apply here too. Because this language seems very clear and purposeful. So that's why I don't want to stir away and give other implications. Then I should be able to do that with any story we read when it's just, we have to keep the same consistency. Well, for me, I keep the same consistency. If I'm going to assume that these people who compiled the books were very particular what words they use where, because this meant this and it connected to this, and all this stuff,
Sure.
then this is as purposeful. And then with that purposefulness, there's a whole lot of me. There's no agreement, rather than just telling and then entering into Egypt. Then there's no interaction with God and the Pharaoh, or God and Abram here, or in any way. It's just narration is saying that Lord brought disease because of the situation. And then Pharaoh is like, get the hell out of here, all of you. And didn't kill anybody. Could have just murdered everybody instead.
He could have. He's king.
Maybe
He can do
that
what
could
he
have
wants.
gotten rid of the disease, right? Like, let's say, if you're a crazy Pharaoh, not an honorable person like he seems, but a crazy Pharaoh, you would have probably killed everybody. It's just like, let me just kill everybody and burn to get rid of whatever had just happened. Like, but he didn't do that.
Well, he's clearly afraid of what would happen if he killed everyone. Like, just taking the wife brought plagues. If he killed everyone, he'd be afraid that it's going to be a plague that destroys all
that's
of
a fair
Egypt.
point.
So it's like the safest thing to do is like, why don't you get out of here? Because if I kill you all, your God might kill me and my kingdom. So just leave.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting one, because it's just, it's literally the way he says, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife, dude? What the?" Like, it's just, the language is hilarious to me, and so interesting and very relatable. Kind of like, dude, what
Yeah.
the hell? Like, really?
It's a very interesting story. I see it as Abram and his tribe being stuck in a rock and a hard place. He and his wife come up with a plan to try to survive. It starts to go really bad, and then God saves them from it, and actually ends up making it a blessing.
Here's
That's the traditional interpretation.
here's another point actually that just came to me. No, he didn't have to go to Egypt, so he's not stuck in a hard rock or whatever you just said, because he could have just not go there. If he's afraid of death,
Well, no,
he
yeah,
could have
yeah.
just
You know,
fasted or continued his journey to Canaan. He didn't have to go there.
well, I
He
totally
made the
agree with you.
decision.
I brought that up earlier. That no, God told him to go to Egypt. He
No,
went there because there was a famine and he was afraid of starving.
exactly.
And
He
he was
liked
supposed to
to have
trust
good
God,
things.
but right, you could totally interpret it as him not trusting God anymore. So he goes to Egypt because he's not trusting God's going to provide for him because there's a famine. And now he goes to Egypt. Now has this whole plan to try to not die, and it ends up going awry. And it's like, if you had just trusted God and stayed in Canaan, you probably would have been just fine.
And wouldn't cause a freaking, uh, plague upon some other people who completely blindly just without knowing. Imagine, like, just such a backstabbing, right? Like, you have no idea. You didn't. It's one thing if the Pharaoh was truly portrayed as a bad guy, like he just took her against her will, or it didn't matter if his wife or this or that. There's any kind of implication of bad situation happening with the Pharaoh forcefully practicing his power. Nothing like that, right? He's just completely
Sure.
backstab of like, whoa, dude, I didn't know
Yeah, I
this.
mean, if you want to interpret Pharaoh as being, an honorable man, you can put that into the story. That it's like, okay, this is your sister. I want her as my wife. And then Abram's even in a worse position now because he can't say to the king of the land, "Oh, actually, I lied to you," because now he's even in a worse position. Like Abram keeps messing. At first, he goes to Egypt, right? Let's interpret this as if that was his decision, not God telling him. He goes to Egypt because doesn't trust God. And then now he has to come up with some sort of plan not to die. So he decides he has to lie to survive. And then the Pharaoh wants to take his wife, and now he's even in a worse position, because he's stuck in his lie, right? And he's like, well, what am I going to do? Now my wife is taken, and I'm given all this great stuff, but, what am I going to do now? And God's like, all right, let me rescue you. Send some plagues. All right, Pharaoh's going to send you out. Let me rescue you from this trap that you walked
F
into.
those people. Let me just rescue you. Huh? This is
Well,
God
yeah, he
supposed to
rescued
love all
Abram because
people.
yeah, Abram was the person he had chosen for particular reasons for the story that leads to Jesus. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they have anything to do with each other. But the another thing that crossed my mind with that, the traditions. There's this crazy tradition in Armenian marriage thing that I'm gonna butcher it because I only recall it fragmented as a kid, so it's going to be like probably just not full and not coherent. But there's actually a whole thing, a little traditional dance with the brother. So let's say you take a wife, you go get the blessing of the father. They decide. So now you exchange whatever. Like there's the dowry,
Dowry.
and yeah. So you do this entire thing, and then at the wedding, I think the brother's supposed to just stick a knife to the entrance and not let her go, and then the guy's supposed to, I don't know, do something or bribe him possibly with wealth, and then now they're good, and then he lives very well and wealthy, and she goes on her merry way. So there's this bizarre ancient tradition that I don't see it. Obviously we don't do that anymore, but like even in my lifetime growing up, that those kind of weird things were happening as part of like, oh, this is a traditional thing, kind of like the breaking the plate upon the entry of the house and all that. So yeah, so a lot of these things just to me ring and develop very differently, because I think we also hold so much of ancient traditions that today, on a today's world scale, just makes zero sense. It still doesn't make any sense to brother going and sticking a knife and getting paid to, okay, fine, I guess you can take my sister. It's just, yeah, this is why certain things just stick out to me very differently. But
Right.
yeah.
So the brother have a southern accent. Like, if anyone's going to sleep with my sister, it's going to be me.
No, definitely not in our culture. Incest is absolutely not a thing, never has been, not even in any, like not even in a way of like rumors or fringe minority. It's a very like
Right.
everybody would be God-fearing because you're supposed to be 8 generations detached, to be able to look at a woman that's, as a wife or as a lover. Minimum 8 generations. All right. Well, that was a crazy chapter and a crazy discussion. But if you guys made it this far and like what you're seeing, subscribe. Oh my God. I can't do this when you're there. I don't know why. It's just, I feel so weird not to talk to you and all of a sudden to
If you
talk to the
guys want
camera.
more of this stuff, like, subscribe, and share.
Exactly. Yes, please. I have really hard time asking people to subscribe, but we need to sometimes, man. Okay.